Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon for this very important webinar on how to participate in a protest or a march with type 1 diabetes and advocate safely. We have with us two very qualified friends of children with diabetes to lead this discussion, Cynthia Deitle and Lee Fickling. And I would like them to introduce themselves, and then we will begin the webinar. Cynthia?
Thank you, Jeff, and welcome everybody. Thanks for dialing into this the webinar. We know you have a lot of things to do on a Sunday afternoon, but thanks for spending a little bit of time with us today. I've been teaching this topic at Children with Diabetes Conference in Orlando for the past several years, a version of it. So I'm glad to be able to do it virtually. Jeff had asked me also to do this because I spent over 20 years as an FBI agent investigating police brutality and hate crimes, and especially police misconduct during protests and marches. So I have some experience in this area, both from the law enforcement point of view and as a civil rights advocate. I do want to just take just a moment to say that Lee and Jeff and I are very mindful of the fact that there are some very, very important issues surrounding what's happening in our country today, involving systemic racism, centuries of oppression of African Americans, protesting, marching, fighting for the rights that we all know we deserve. A lot of those topics are beyond the scope of this webinar, but I will offer to anybody who's listening and watching, if you would like to talk about any of that, especially with the background that I bring to the table, I am happy to talk to any of you. And I will make sure that Jeff gives out my email address at the end of the webinar, but we're happy to talk about that. I also want to say briefly too, just to give you a trigger warning. Sometimes we talk about interactions with law enforcement that can trigger some memories and feelings of an interaction that you may have had, or you know somebody that did, that wasn't good, and it wasn't right, and it wasn't legal. I do just want to say that these are some difficult topics for folks, and if you need to sign off or ask difficult questions, we certainly understand. We appreciate that. And with that, I will throw it over to Lee.
Thanks, Cynthia, and thanks, Jeff. My name is Lee Fickling, and I am a type 1 diabetes mom. I live in North Carolina. I'm an attorney. My background is in higher education administration, but I work a lot with large event management, both at the university level and at city levels as well. So Cynthia and I are glad that you've joined us today. Again, our focus is going to be how to participate safely in a protest or joining a march. Certainly, this is very relevant right now whenever we think about things that are going on out in society today, but this is not just limited to protests or march. This is really about large event management as well, and how you can participate safely with type 1 diabetes. As Cynthia, the same thing. I'm a type 1 mom. My daughter has type 1 diabetes for the last 7 years, and they are now 10 years old. And so when I think about my kids getting ready to join a march, these are the really things that are so important to me as a mom to be able to share with them to help prepare them for the future. So today, Cynthia and I are going to talk to you about a lot of different things. And this is sort of an overview about having the rights to be able to protest and march. And absolutely, you have the right to be able to get out there and share your voice and share your feelings about different current events that are going on today. We want to help you prepare for how you can do that. We want to talk about the limits and the scope of protest, what you should do once you arrive at a protest or a march, how you should participate during the march itself, what you may want to do if you're stopped by the police, and what happens if an officer tells you that you're under arrest. How do you handle that? And then finally concluding with what do you do if you feel like that your rights have been violated by an officer.
As Lee said, we all have the right to demonstrate, to protest, to march, and that is guaranteed to each of us in the First Amendment to the US Constitution. The amendment, while it does say that you have a right to peaceably assemble and petition the government to redress your grievances, the Supreme Court has interpreted that over the last several decades to put a little bit of borders around that right. For example, the police department, local government officials, they have the right to impose what's called time, place, and manner restrictions around the protest march. What time the protest can start and end, the manner of the protest. For example, you're allowed to carry a sign, but perhaps not a stick that the sign is attached to, because it could be used as a weapon, or it could be used to hurt somebody. So they can put some time, place, and manner restrictions, and also just where you're allowed to march. The route of the march can be set by government officials, and all that is well within the government's right to do. The government can also stop the protest if they feel that the protest has gotten out of control in their view. They have a right to stop it. They have a right to stop any individual who's protesting or marching or demonstrating and doing so in a violent or destructive manner. I think that makes sense to all of us. We don't have the right to be violent to somebody else or destroy property during a protest. You also do not have the right to protest on private property. That is not within your First Amendment right. And some government offices and some public safety buildings are out of bounds as well. For example, as I think we just saw recently, you don't have a right to protest in certain government buildings and facilities like that. That's not within your rights. So you have a right to protest, but with limits.
So you've decided that you're going to march and you're going to go out there. So what are the things that you need to do as an individual with type 1 diabetes? And this is definitely a non-exhaustive list, but I want you to really pay close attention to the items that we've listed on here. And you see that we've got the picture of the Skittles, we've got a picture of our face mask, but we want to go through these items really to help you think about what you need to do at home before you get out there to join the march, so that way you can do this safely. So you do want to bring your medical bag with you, and you want to make sure that you bring enough supplies for 2 to 3 days. And that sounds really unusual, especially if you think that you're just going to run downtown and you're going to participate in a quick march. You've got your signs, you're ready to be able to go to the protest, and you're not going to be gone for long. But you really do need to prepare in advance to bring enough supplies with you for 2 to 3 days. Try to figure out, is there a way for you to be able to keep your insulin cool? You need to bring backup insulin with you. So do you have a Frio pouch for you to be able to keep in your diabetes bag? And all of that to say that understand that your bag may be searched. And so I think that all of us are used to going to places where we have security screenings, where we have to open up our bags and let people look through our bags. And I think that's the new normal. So be prepared that somebody may look through your bag, and you need to be prepared to be able to explain to someone who may be going through a security screening that these are my diabetes supplies. So the types of things that you want to bring with you: water, snacks. It certainly is very hot in North Carolina right now. So while we have the picture of the Skittles, I'm not sure that Skittles is necessarily the best thing that we want to keep in our pockets. Glucose tabs would be another thing. The next thing that's really important is for you to bring a buddy. Tell your family members who's going with you, and make sure that you share the contact information of your friend that's going with you to the march or to the protest. Wear your medical alert bracelet. And so Cynthia and I have talked about this a lot at Friends for Life at our real conferences whenever we're together in Orlando or at the regional conferences. You know, medical alert bracelets now are really fancy and they're very hip, and you cannot even tell that necessarily that that's what they are. But it's really important for you to be able to have medical identification with you at all times. And one of the things that we really do recommend is to keep an ID card with you in your wallet. Keep it next to your ID, because you're going to want to make sure that you have your ID with you. So have state issued identification with a wallet card right beside it. So if you do have to produce your ID, then that way you'll have the diabetes wallet card right beside it. Also take a doctor's note. You know, that never hurts to be able to have a doctor's note stating that you have type 1 diabetes, that you need to be able to have access to your insulin and your supplies. Make sure that you bring a cell phone charger and a battery backup. Due to the times that we're living in now with COVID, you want to make sure that you have your mask, possibly have gloves with you, and hand sanitizer. And if you wear an insulin pump, make sure that you bring an extra infusion set or a site with you. So again, while there may be people out there that tell you that you need to pack lightly, you're only going to be gone for a few hours, think about what that means as a person with type 1 diabetes. If you're marching down a sidewalk and people are swinging their arms and you're in close contact with each other, what if somebody accidentally rips out your sight? Again, they're not going to do that on purpose, but if you're in the middle of a place where you don't really have access to your normal supplies, how are you going to be able to deal with that? So making sure that in your medical bag that you've got extra supplies to be able to help you along the way, so that way you're safe while you're out there advocating for yourself.
I would add one more thing about that I thought as Lee was speaking. You might want to go back to old school and actually write down the telephone numbers of your friends, your family, your doctor, and put that in your pocket somewhere. I know as we've been watching some of the news feed of the protests and marches, a lot of people have their phones in their hand and they're filming and they're watching, and we'll get to that in a minute, but the other phone's in their hand. You drop your phone and it shatters and it no longer works, you might not know how to reach your doctor or your family member or your buddy. So it might be good, just old school, go back to write it down and put that in your pocket. Let's see. I would highly, highly encourage you to research the route, the limits. If there's a permit that's been granted, what does that permit say? You really need to know where you're going, how long you think this will last, and what to expect when you get there. So are there bathrooms that you will have access to? Are there porta potties? Will there be water that you can purchase or that will be given out? Is there shade if you start to get really, really warm? Is there somewhere that you can go to take care of yourself? What are you allowed to do? What are you prohibited from doing? If there's a way to read that permit, I would encourage you to do so. Again, if there is one that's been issued by the government, I would encourage you to do so. And don't be afraid to ask when you get there. Ask a law enforcement member. There's a lot of times there's people who, organizers of the march that will have designated clothing or vests on. Ask them. Ask them. Don't be afraid to ask. Make sure you know what you're doing. In a lot of cities across the country, the government and the police department have imposed curfews. If the march is going on for a very long time and you're approaching the curfew time and law enforcement tells you you're approaching curfew, it's time to go home, go home. They're saying that for a reason. They're giving you the warning to go home. Get off the parade route, get off the protest march route and go home, please. Even if a police officer tells you, look, this is over, it's time to go home, please, this is done. Listen to that. You might not agree, you might have just started, you might say there's 4 hours left before curfew. Argue that later. The whole point of what Lee and I are talking to you about this afternoon is just to get home safe. If somebody who has the authority to tell you to go home, a police officer, a mayor, a government official, go home. You don't want to face arrest or citation just for arguing that one fact.
So you've decided that you're going to go to the march or to the protest. And so these are some next tips for you to be able to think about. We've already talked about making sure that you've got 2 to 3 days worth of supplies in your diabetes bag. So once you arrive on site, assuming that you're going to get there, you're going to park your car, you're going to arrive via public transportation, what's the next best thing that you need to do? So number one, we go back to our buddy and we think about, do you have a plan if you get separated? So we're all marching together. There's lots of people. It's very crowded. It's hot. It may be rainy. You don't know what's going to happen with the weather. What's going to happen if you get separated from your buddy? And like Cynthia said, what happens if you happen to lose your phone or your phone gets knocked out of your hand? What are you going to do in terms of the one person that you came with or the group of people that you came with? What if you can't get back to your parked car? And I think one of the things that's really important to be able to think about in larger cities across the country, as we've reviewed these protests and we've looked at these marches, you really cannot rely on public transportation because it's very likely that public transportation is going to be suspended. And you also should not rely on rideshare. So Uber and Lyft are probably not going to be your best backups in terms of if you get to a spot in the location and you decide that it's time for you to get out of there, you really do need to have sort of other plans in place for you to be able to get back to your home and get back away from sort of the protest and the march route. Your medical bag that we talked about before, again, we're not thinking that this is going to be small. This is not a time for you to bring like your clutch that you would bring into a football game or to a basketball game that can like fit into the size of your hand. You want this to be something that's big, and you want to make sure that this is attached to you. So think about a backpack, think about a sling bag that goes across your body, sort of like a messenger bag, or think about a very large fanny pack. Do not listen to your friends. Do not listen to the march organizers or police when they tell you to come join our protest, come join our march, but pack lightly as you come. You really need to understand that you need to have the supplies with you so that way you can safely participate while you're there. And you just don't know what diabetes is going to do. I think all of us know that there are highs and lows with diabetes, and the excitement from something like a protest or march for being able to participate in, our blood sugar may behave in a way that we really are not able to anticipate. Maybe we're going to be really high and we're going to need extra water. Maybe you're going to tank and you're going to be low and you're going to need way more glucose than you anticipated. So really making sure that you've got the medical bag that's on you at all times. You've got it on a backpack, you're wearing the fanny pack, you've got it on a messenger bag. And again, keeping in mind that it's okay for someone to search that bag. It is your bag. And, if someone says that they're going to do a bag screening, absolutely let them search it. And what we always advise you at Friends for Life is just to be able to start announcing as someone looks through your bag, there's needles in here, I have diabetes, these are my medical supplies, just to be able to alert people that are going through screening that as they go through their bag, they may see things in there that they may not be expecting, in terms of just a regular purse or something that you're bringing. And I think it's really also important for you to be aware, following the rules. Pay attention to what the rules of the march are. Listen to the police and the government officials. They're not out there trying to stop you from participating in this, but if they're telling you that you need to be able to stay on the main road and not cross over sort of barriers or barricades, don't cross over bollards into certain areas that are restricted, pay attention to that and follow the rules so that way you can safely participate. And so while you're there, we're marching along. You can see the icons at the top of the screen. Here we are. We've got our big diabetes bags on. It's really heavy because we've got so much water and so many juice boxes in the bag with us. We're feeling good. We're following the route exactly like we're supposed to. So what do we need to do next? I think that all of us know that we need to take breaks. We need to be able to check our blood sugar. We need to be able to hydrate because again, the excitement may cause unexpected changes in your blood sugar. So just like we would be doing at Friends for Life, take time to be able to check on your blood sugar. Again, the march and the protest is going to continue on. Pull off to the side, take care of the diabetes so that way you're able to get back in and join in and participate the way that you want to. If you start to feel ill, if you start to have a diabetes reaction, if something starts to happen and you go low or you're extra high, what you need to do is ask for help. And there's going to be plenty of helpers that are going to be around. So again, look for a police officer, look for somebody that's a march organizer, look for someone wearing some sort of safety reflective vest, look for EMS or somebody that has an ambulance or some sort of emergency responder. Tell them that you have type 1 diabetes and that you need immediate attention. Because you don't want to put that off, because again, these routes may be very long. You may be out there for many, many hours. And so again, sort of keep a check. Your diabetes better than anybody else, but I think that we all have to be realistic that there may be a time when we've got to stop out and take care of the diabetes before the diabetes tries to take care of us. And just a notice, like Cynthia was talking about earlier, you're there and you have every right to be able to capture the moment. And we want you to be able to have your phones out and we want you to be able to record what's going on, take pictures for your memory books and for your scrapbooks. But just realize that depending on your state, there may be rules against you recording other individuals. So you want to make sure that you have consent of people and be aware also that while you're out there recording other people, people could also be recording you. And they may be putting that on social media without your consent. So is that something that you're okay with? So again, keeping in mind that there may be prohibitions against recording people. And again, being very smart about the way that whenever you're capturing your moments when you're there, what you're going to do with those as a bystander and as a participant in the march.
So hopefully this is not going to happen to you. And I always preface my comments when I speak at Friends for Life that this is what I hope never happens, but I want you to understand what your rights are if you are stopped by the police. A law enforcement official has the right to stop you. And what I mean by stop you is stop you from moving, stop you from continuing to march. They have a right to just make you stay still for just a minute if they have reasonable suspicion that you violated the law or that you are about to do so. Lee and I could talk to you for hours about that reasonableness standard and what exactly that means and the Supreme Court jurisprudence around reasonable stops. Just understand, if you're stopped by the police, they do have a right to do that if they have reason to believe something has happened. You did something wrong, or you're about to do something wrong. So they do have a right to stop you under those circumstances. When Lee and I were reviewing this presentation, we both thought the same thing over and over. We understand, and as a former law enforcement official, I know these are not calming, relaxing interactions with another human being, but to the extent that you can, and be mindful about this, stay calm. Stay calm. We want you to get through this. And this, keep your hands out. Don't fold them underneath your arms. Don't put them in your pockets. Keep your hands out. It lets the officer know that there's nothing in your hands that could hurt the officer. Keep your hands out to the extent that you remember to do that. As Lee said, you cannot say enough, I have type 1 diabetes. Even if the first thing the officer asks you is, hey, hang on for a second. What are you doing? What's your name? I have type 1 diabetes, okay? You can't say that enough. We encourage you to repeat that over and over again. I have type 1 diabetes. I am insulin dependent. All of my supplies are in this bag that is attached to me. There's my backpack, my fanny pack. I have needles in there. I have lancets. I have sharp instruments. I have type 1. Do you understand, sir? Just so that is very clear that you have sharp objects on you and you have a medical condition. Over and over and over. You can't say that enough. Yes, we all know from Law and Order and watching many law enforcement TV shows that you have the right to remain silent. You probably all know that. But Lee and I would encourage you, answer reasonable questions. What's your name? Where do you live? That's perfectly fine to answer. If you start to get a little nervous because the officer is saying, are you here with a group? Who's the leader of your group? Has anyone in your group violated the law? If you start just to get uncomfortable with the questioning, not because you've done something wrong, but you're just uncomfortable, you can stop answering those questions. But the reasonable questions, what's your name? Answer that. And then also say you have type 1 diabetes. If the questions start getting a little bit uncomfortable for you, ask, am I under arrest? Am I free to leave? Those are the buzzwords that you want the officer to answer for you. Am I free to leave? May I continue walking? You want to know that. If he says, yes, I have no more questions for you, then leave. Leave the march, continue walking, do whatever you need to do. But if he affirmatively states that you're free to leave, you're free to leave. And if he says you're not under arrest, that means you're free to leave. You can't have it both ways, okay?
And Cynthia, real fast, I think that one of the things that, I always tell people that I speak 2 languages very fluently, that's English and diabetes. And I think that that's one of the things that we all have in common. And I think that one of the words, the phrases that we use is I'm high or I'm low. And so, when we're advising you to, again, sort of be on repeat, I have type 1 diabetes, I have type 1 diabetes, I think it's really important, you've got the backpack, the fanny pack, make sure that your name is in that in case if you do get separated from your bag when you're stopped. You want to make sure that your name, your phone number, your contact information is actually written into your bag. But I think another thing that it's going to be really important as you're calm and as you're showing your hands and as you're being open to someone looking in your bag is to make sure that you try to find the right words to explain. So rather than saying I'm high, You know, if you encounter a police officer who's never dealt with diabetes before, other than maybe a class that they've taken whenever they were in training school, you may have to be able to explain, I have type 1 diabetes, my blood sugar is really high, I need some water. Or I have type 1 diabetes, my blood sugar is really low, I need some glucose, I need a juice. Rather than expecting, you know, that every person that you encounter speaks diabetes fluently, we want to make sure that as we're calm and as we're sort of dealing with being stopped by the police, that we use the right words. And so again, that we sort of go beyond saying I'm high, because I'm high may have very different meanings in different sort of scenarios that we may be in. So sort of explaining I'm high with blood sugar issues and I need some water, or I'm low with blood sugar issues and I need some glucose.
That's a really good point, Lee. I can only imagine before my son was diagnosed with type 1, when I was still in the FBI, if somebody were to come up to me in the middle of a very crowded, excited protest march, pouring sweat and saying, I'm high and I got to go to the bathroom, I would not have thought, gee, do you have type 1 diabetes? But Lee is exactly right. Using the buzzwords that we're all used to about highs and lows and BGs, and you have to spell it out. If nothing else, just say, I have a disability. I need a reasonable accommodation. I'm sick. I'm sick. If nothing else, I'm sick and I need your help. I need an ambulance. I need an EMS. I'm sick. Just something. But you cannot say that enough. In the unfortunate occurrence, if the officer says, yes, ma'am, you are under arrest, again, the first words out of your mouth are still going to be, sir, do you understand I have type 1 diabetes? Do you understand that I have a medical condition? Are you aware of that? You also want to know what the charge is. What am I being arrested for, and where am I going to be taken? That are very reasonable questions that the officer has the duty to answer you. He has the duty to tell you what you're being detained or arrested for and where you're going. And usually it's going to be something, especially in a protest march, there'll be the arrest charge, and then he will say, usually it's a male officer, he will say, I'm taking you to central booking, tell your friend it's located on 123 Main Street. You want to make sure your buddy knows that somebody knows you've been arrested and you are being removed from the march to go to central booking, to go somewhere to be processed. You need the buddy to know where you're going, remember what time it is that you've been taken, and you want the buddy to call your family and have your family contact an attorney so the attorney can meet you at the police station. Somebody has to know where you are and what's happened to you. That is crucial. That's crucial. During this entire process, and I teach this at the Friends for Life conferences, you have the right to reasonable, adequate medical care for the time you are first arrested until the time you are released. And that will include, and just like Lee said, the frequent bathroom breaks, access to water, you need food, you need to check your blood sugar, you actually have to prick your finger, you need to administer your insulin. You have the right to do all of those things, Reiterate that you have diabetes, reiterate these are the steps you need to take to keep yourself healthy and alive, over and over and over. If for some reason the officers that are arresting you, processing you, are not getting it, they think you're making it up, they think you're lying about whatever it is this thing is called diabetes because they don't get it, say you want to go to the hospital, say you need an ambulance, you need an EMT, you're sick. Whatever you need to do and communicate to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and your diabetes through this process, whatever you need to do. I know it's very easy for me to say, don't resist. Believe me, I know those words make a lot of people upset. I know those words mean a lot of things to different people, but understand that from my point of view as the mother of a type 1 diabetic child, what we tell him all the time, over and over and over, is his responsibility is to get home safe. And that's what Lee and I would tell you. This isn't about, I was illegally arrested. This isn't about, I'm going to sue. This isn't, all those issues can be dealt with later. You just need to get yourself home safely. You can challenge the arrest later. If you have the officer put any kind of restraints on you, handcuffs, whether it's the traditional medical or traditional metal handcuffs, flexi cuffs, anything like that, if you're restrained, again, make sure you tell the officer, I have type 1 diabetes and the medical supplies that I need to live are in this bag. And if you handcuff me behind my back, I can't get to them. So can we figure out a way that that's fine if you want to handcuff me, but I need access to my bag. I need access to my stuff. You can search it. I will let you search all of it, but I need access to it. So again, whatever you can say over and over and over to talk about your type 1 diabetes and talk about your need to access your medical supplies.
And I think it's really important also, before we move on to the next slide, for those of you all that are new with us, that have not been with us before for Friends for Life, diabetes is a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act. I think that, you need to know that as a person with diabetes, this is a civil right. The diabetes is, it affects your major life activity of your endocrine system. The ADA is there to protect your civil rights. So whenever you encounter law enforcement, if you are under arrest and you're doing the things that Cynthia is advising you today, asking for access to food and water, asking for access to the bathroom, asking for access, to be able to have your bag with you and to keep your supplies with you at all times. Again, you're doing that because you have a disability and you need a reasonable accommodation. So I don't expect you to remember all of those words in the heat of the moment. What we want you to do is, again, to try to remain calm. Again, advise the person that you have diabetes. And like Cynthia said, if you feel like that you're not getting anywhere and you feel like that you are going to become separated from your bag and something's going to happen to where you really are about to have a diabetes emergency, you need to ask for an ambulance, because that's going to kind of put a stop at what's happening. And you're going to be able to get the medical care. So again, you can go back, you can fight this arrest, you can challenge this, you can go back and say that, that your civil rights have been violated as a person with diabetes, as a person with a disability under the ADA. All of those things can come in the future. But again, really what we want to talk to you about today is being, advocating safely, participating in marches, participating in the protests, but making sure that you're safe and that you come out of it alive at the end. And so again, all of these things really kind of focus back in on that. And it's going to be really hard probably to remember that in the moment.
Very good point, Lee. Lee brought up some of these topics too, but if you believe that you were a victim of police brutality, if you believe that the officer used more force than necessary to arrest you, whether that arrest was valid or not, you can challenge that through your attorney later. You can challenge it later. And there are federal civil rights that you can pursue under civil law. There is criminal law. FBI agents like myself years ago who investigated police officers who used excessive force during protest marchers. The FBI has jurisdiction to investigate those violations. And if for some reason you were in a protest march and it was an FBI agent who used excessive force against you, the Department of Justice will investigate FBI agents who mistreat people. So if you believe that you've been a victim of police excessive force, if you believe that the handcuffs were too tight, if you believe that you were mistreated during the arrest process, you have rights that you can vindicate later. You can deal with those later when you are home safely, and you can discuss this with your family and with an attorney. There are numerous organizations that I work with in my day job every single day that are helping people who have been victims in protest marches and victims of a lot of very unpleasant things, excessive force, alleged violations of curfew. There's a lot, there's a lot, and we've all seen them going on the news. But there are many organizations, there are just a few that I've listed underneath there. If anything has happened to you in a protest march and you feel that your rights were violated, again, I'm happy to talk to you about that offline. If you feel your rights were violated under the ADA, I hate to speak for Lee, but I'm sure she will assist you to get help with that as well. But all of that is later. We just want everyone to get home safely, and we cannot reiterate that enough.
So we really are excited that you've been with us today, and we hope that we've given you these tips. I think one of the things that, as I was listening to Cynthia talk about sort of the flow of what may happen at a march or a protest, I think that one of the things, certainly in light of some of the things that we've seen recently in terms of arrests with people with diabetes, I think that it's really important, especially if you're in a group and there's multiple people that are being arrested. You know, we want you to be with your buddy. We want you to have a safety plan. We want your family to know where you're participating. But I think when it comes down to it at the end, you are your only advocate. And you've got to make sure that you really are being able to be clear, to advocate for yourself if you do find yourself in a spot of being arrested, and taken in, again, to very clearly articulate that you have diabetes, that you need access to your supplies, that this is a civil right, that you are disabled. And again, if you need to, ask for emergency assistance, because I think that that can kind of put a stopgap in things that are happening. And we hope that it never gets to that point. We hope that you're able to go and that you're able to voice your concerns and participate with the way that you want to be able to make your voice heard, and really be able to get out there and make history for yourself, and remember this as an amazing time when all of us are learning together. But again, doing that safely and keeping diabetes sort of at the forefront of your mind as you go forward.
I will add too, with what Lee said, that my wife and I have taken our son on protest marches in the last several years. We've taken him to a few. And if some of you that have been marchers in the past, you know that usually you get past a certain police barrier or a certain location and there's police officers that want to search your bag. And it was really funny that they wanted to search our son's bag. He was a minor child at the time. But we explained right away. We said, this is why he has a backpack. You're free to look at it. He'll take it off if you want, so you can inspect it, but there's sharp instruments in there. And everything was fine. But we were very, very upfront about the fact that he had a bag and what was in that bag, and they were free to search it. I know for some of the marches, it may not apply now. The police officers would do sometimes what sports arenas do, and they would put a tag around his bag, but it had been searched by law enforcement, so nobody would bother him again. Anyway, it's just, we were very upfront, we were very open, and again, you know, obviously our concern was not just to enjoy participating in history, but it was also to make sure the three of us got home safe.
Cynthia and Lee, there was a couple of questions and comments that have come up that I want to share with you. Karen asks, while we may have the right to all of these things, what happens when they are not provided? An example is what happened in Cincinnati, where I live this weekend, when a young woman with type 1 diabetes was arrested and her diabetes bag was taken from her. And the officers in recordings were seen actually sort of laughing at her. So what would you advise in that situation?
Well, I'm going to throw part of this answer over to Lee to talk about the ADA part of it and what her rights are under the ADA. But again, once the situation's over and the person is home and safe, again, I know this is really easy for me to say, but I would use that as a teachable moment. I would encourage her and her family and her friends and whatever diabetes supporters and advocates she has around her, the local JD or F chapter, whoever is around her, that she can go to the police department and say, I'd like to talk to you about what happened to me, to teach you about what diabetes is, so this doesn't happen to anybody else. And I've done it. I've seen numerous Friends for Life families who've done it, who've maybe weren't treated so great at an airport, let's say, by TSA. And they went back and said, can we meet with you and show you what this strange thing is? It's called an insulin pump that's attached to my 3-year-old son. Can we show you about that and show you why he needs some special attention when he goes through screening? Use it as a teachable moment. No, the officers were not justified in any stretch of the imagination to take her bag away from her and to be so disrespectful as to laugh at her. I would also encourage the family, file a complaint against the officer. It does the department no good if there is not a paper trail, against that officer. If he treated you badly and violated his oath of office, you need to complain. You need to complain to the department, the FBI, if you feel that it needs to go that route, the Department of Justice. Complain. Try to teach them to do better, but make sure they are called out on that behavior.
Okay. And Ed actually asked a very similar question. You follow the law enforcement instructions, but you are stopped or detained, and the police confiscate your bag. What is your recourse in that moment? You know, obviously you've counseled, be calm, the goal is to get home. But if you are in need of your diabetes supplies in the moment, can you review what your suggestions were to make sure that those are returned and brought back to you?
What Lee said is a very, very instructive. Make sure that your name and all your contact information is in that bag without question, so they know somewhere down the road that's your stuff. First thing. The second thing is, if you have been forcibly separated from your bag, you can say during the moment, I have type 1 diabetes, all the supplies that I need to live are in that bag. You have to give me that bag back. If the immediate answer is some awful expletive and you're not getting your bag back, and the officer drives away on a motorcycle or throws it into your bag into a paddy wagon or something, if it's gone, you need to find someone else, anybody else, to call 911 immediately and have an ambulance, an EMT, a paramedic, somebody come and meet you. You cannot be without, we all know this, you can't be without your supplies. So do what you need to do to get immediate help for yourself then. You can chase your bag later, but get help for yourself right then in the moment.
Very good.
Lee, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's exactly what I would suggest too. You know, again, you know, as respectfully as you can, you know, try to reason, but it may be in a position to where there is no reasoning, and you know that your voice is not being heard. So I think that in that moment, it's almost like a fight or flight, and so your very next best step, if you're separated from the bag, if the police officer is not listening to you, if you do feel like that there's going to be a diabetes situation, which there's going to be, we know how diabetes is. You know, it's just a matter of time till there is a high or till there is a low when you're going to need to be able to deal with it. Then your next thing that you need to do is try to have someone call 911 and, you know, get emergency services there, because again, that person's going to be sort of on the outside. They're going to be able to come in, they're going to be able to assess it, and they are going to hear the words diabetes, and they're going to understand what that means, and be able to sort of give you immediate medical care.
And don't, you know, I would also say, Jeff, don't feel like, yeah, but I'm fine. My blood sugar is 120. I don't need an ambulance. That's embarrassing. Everyone's going to look at me. They're all going to film this. I'm fine. We all know you're fine at that moment. In about a minute or 2 or 10 or 30, you're not going to be fine. You're going to be very agitated, very upset, most likely causing that blood sugar to skyrocket. You need attention at that moment to head that off.
Very, very good. We have another comment in the chat about, is there an online type 1 diabetes educational video that we could share with smaller law enforcement agencies through national organizations?
You've stumped me.
I
thought
don't know the answer to that either, but
you mean like something that's shown to police departments and things like that? Is that kind of what the comment?
I think that was the question, and
okay,
we don't need to have an answer here, but as part of the write-up for this, and by the way, this webinar is being recorded, and we'll have it on the Children with Diabetes website sometime tomorrow. I'm going to reach out to our friend Donna, who has done extensive education about type 1 diabetes to police departments throughout the state of Florida, and ask for her suggestions or guidance on what tools or videos she used in her training.
And if there isn't one, if there is not a roll call video, for example, let's see how we can make one. Let's own that solution.
Here's our collective opportunity to make it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, one of the things that, my husband's in law enforcement, and certainly, working with disability law and disability access and disability rights, I think that police officers and law enforcement are absolutely trained on working with individuals with disabilities. And so we've talked about before that diabetes is a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act. This falls under Title II of the ADA. So whenever we think about individuals with disabilities being arrested, being detained, taken to jail, you think about things like wheelchair accessibility, you think about communicating with maybe people that are deaf, people that are hard of hearing, or people that are blind. Working with people that have diabetes is very similar. And so while there may be some level of training, and certainly cases in the past about individuals that have diabetes, I think that there is some base level of training for police officers and for law enforcement. But perhaps there are other resources out there that specifically address diabetes, and that would be great to be able to find out if those exist.
If there aren't any more questions, and I'm not seeing any additional questions come up, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Cynthia and Lee and to all of you who joined us for this webinar. And I urge you to take advantage of these opportunities to express your concerns, share your passion, and go make some history. So thank you all very much, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.